Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our panel. We're really excited today to host a panel related to studying STEM program in the United States. And with us, we have three exceptionally successful panelists who will walk you through some of their positive experience in both having studied and currently teaching in the STEM field, as well as the positive impact of the U.S. education system on their STEM-based careers long-term. And they'll also be able to provide you some tips for students who wish to pursue either a STEM undergraduate degree, graduate degree, or postdoctorate. With us today, we'll start off with Dr. Claudia Lewis, who is currently the Chief Planning Officer at the Department of Education, Innovation, and Gender Relations in St. Lucia. She holds a PhD in Information Science and Technology from Syracuse University. Dr. Lewis, why don't you take it away?
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome to all our listeners. Very happy to share about my experience studying in the US, and also to share with you about my Fulbright experience. We just want you to sort of stay tuned and listen to us. We'll be giving you lots of tips on studying in the US. For myself, the Fulbright experience for me was a very eye-opening journey. I experienced the US in a manner I had not experienced it before as a visitor. Say, for example, you visit the US for a short period of time, that is completely different from studying in the US. So throughout this hour, I will join my fellow panelists to tell you a little more about my positive experience in the US.
Great, thank you for that. And next we have Felicia Cox, also on our panel. She's currently the Renewable Energy Coordinator at the Barbados National Oil Company in Barbados. She attained a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering and an MBA in electrical engineering and computer science from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or more commonly known as MIT. Felicia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks. Hi, my name is Felicia Cox. I'm a Barbadian born and bred, and I was privileged enough to be accepted to MIT for undergrad. I did both an MEng, Master of Engineering, and a Bachelor of Science there in electrical engineering and computer science generally. It was a great experience, and I look forward to sharing that with you, as we have our discussions today.
Great, thank you so much. And next we have Dr. Cardinal Ward, who is currently a professor of electrical engineering at MIT. He holds a PhD in physics from Yale University and is one of the world's leading experts on materials, devices, and systems for optical information processing and displays. He has spent sabbaticals as visiting professor at the University of California, San Diego, as well as distinguished visiting professor of optics at Alabama A&M University, and visiting professor at, and I apologize in advance for not knowing Spanish, the Universidad Carlos de Madrid, and as well as the Barbados campus of the University of the West Indies. Dr. Ward, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much. I left Barbados, which is where I was born, to go to university. It was my first time visiting the United States, so I never visited before that just for fun. I went to Stevens Institute of Technology, which is in Hoboken, New Jersey. Most people don't know where Hoboken is, but it's right across the river from Manhattan. And its claim to fame is that that's where Frank Sinatra was born. I spent 4 years there, and then, as you heard, I went on and I got a PhD in physics at Yale University. And I've only had one job, one paying job all my life, and that was being a professor at MIT, starting at the rank of assistant professor and moving up to full professor. So I've been in the US for a very long time, and you'll hear a little bit more about my experiences as we go forward.
Great, wonderful. Dr. Lewis, do you want to talk a little bit about your Fulbright experience?
Oh, yes. Yes, I will. I think from the application process, because that's one of the aspects that impressed me the most. Fulbright makes the whole application process to universities seamless. Yes, you have to do a lot of background work. I had to say, for example, I had to write many essays about what I wanted my research to be in, um, because I was getting one of the International Fulbright Science and Technology Awards. That was during the inaugural year. Um, so I had to write about my research, how it's going to benefit my country, all of these things. But from the time these essays were written, the application process was made seamless because I was assigned a program officer. And the program officer is the one who actually did the interfacing with the US universities on my behalf. So I did not have to apply to 2 or 3 US universities. It was all done for me. And also, that helped me navigate the US education system. I did not really understand the details of the various universities and what they stand for. So the program officer really guided me through, went through all the various programs. What would the best program be? Sometimes we just hear about one particular university is famous, but the program specialists, they are specialists in their particular field. So for information systems, for example, she was the one who directed me to understand that Syracuse University was one of the top 3 in information systems in the US. And from the application process, there's the orientation, the gateway session when you're selected, where you meet in one city. And in my case, the gateway orientation was in Miami, Florida. So there we had about 200 participants from over 70 countries around the world. So it's like a mini United Nations. And you get to meet people and exchange where you come from, and you make lifelong friends. And throughout my time in the US, we had these enrichment seminars where they brought together. So it was not only about academic study, it was about a time to meet and greet. It was also a time to provide support, also emotional support, any type of support that you really required. Career advice, we had structured sessions during these enrichment seminars. And there are many more experiences about the Fulbright program, but so during the course of our session, I would be able to tell you a little more about that experience.
Great, thank you. Felicia, do you want to talk to the group about what led you to study STEM at MIT?
Oh, okay. So when I was a kid, I love science. I love anything science and math oriented. So I used to watch a lot of programs, especially things like National Geographic, all kinds of documentaries. And it just so happened that there was some breakthrough. I can't remember exactly what it was. That part didn't make the biggest impression on me. What happened is I noticed the name of this school. I saw MIT flash on the screen, and I was like, wow, this is such an amazing thing that they're talking about. And it so happened that, a little while later, maybe a few weeks or a few months, I saw the school's name again. I was like, wait, isn't that the same school as before? And then it just happened that, MIT's name popped up in so many things that I said, you know what? I have to go to that school. I don't know what I have to do to get to that school, but I have to go to that school. That became my target. And the good thing about it in making it my target is that despite the fact I held it very close to my chest, my family, especially my dad, who Professor Ward knew personally, was very supportive in my efforts to be someone in STEM, to be a scientist. Then when they discovered the hole in the ozone layer, I said, I have to be a scientist. I must be a scientist. We are creating problems for our planet, and I want my country to help either to resolve it or to not cause problems like this ourselves. So I felt like I could play a part, and I knew that I believed that going to MIT would help me do so. And so I kind of plotted my own path there. It's ironic because so they are, at the time, you kind of had this hierarchy of secondary schools in Barbados. It's less so now. But I turned to my dad one day and I asked, Dad, if I want to do science, what secondary school should I go to? Now, a lot of people in systems similar to the English school system, you'll have quote unquote grammar schools. They have prestige and they're old, and everybody wants to go there. That was not my focus. I didn't care about the prestige. I only cared, well, is this a good science school? And so that is kind of the way that I approach everything. It's not about prestige per se, is this a good choice? Is this a good option for me? And I didn't know much about MIT before I got there. I just knew I wanted to go there. I have to say that, it might have been better in certain ways if there had been more support when I did it. Unlike Professor Dr. Louis, I didn't have that coordination. So what went in it for me was more, I want to do engineering. There's no guarantee I'll get into MIT. So let me see, what can I do in engineering? Where can I do engineering? And then for my parents, it was accessibility. They really wanted me to be on the East Coast of the US or Canada. So then, that kind of shrunk down my focus. Okay. And then it had a lot to do then with the cost. Because at that time, let me tell you, 50 US plus dollars per university meant that I pretty much just, picked three that were looking like they were good options. So I applied to MIT, Harvard, and University of Pennsylvania. And I said, okay, I need to get into one, I'll keep my fingers crossed. And the rest of my effort was spent trying to get a good education and grounding here and perhaps get a Barbados scholarship, which to my mind at the time was, the main way that I was going to pay for this. But I was determined that I was going to get there. So I would have found a way one way or the other. But yeah, the path there is quite different from Dr. Louis. And I can say that unlike Professor Ward, I actually did go to the States several times before I went there for school, because I have relatives that live mostly on the East Coast of the US, and my parents were fortunate enough to be able to travel when I was pretty young. So I'd been exposed, but studying and visiting are two completely different things.
Thank you so much. Dr. Ward, as somebody who remains very active in academia, what would you say to prospective students who are contemplating going to study in STEM, and what the sort of benefits are that you talk to students that you have throughout your career and school years?
Okay, Brianna, great question. Well, I'm very passionate about students getting into STEM and helping them get into the STEM disciplines, only because in the Caribbean, a lot of our bright students go into law and medicine, in addition to the STEM fields, but would like to see a lot more go into the STEM fields because we have some economic problems in the Caribbean that STEM students can help to solve during their career options. Because I always claim that scientists and engineers create a lot more jobs than doctors and lawyers. And we need the jobs. We need to raise ourselves out of poverty for most of us. And I think the fact that STEM combined with entrepreneurship allows us to start to build companies here that could have global impacts and bring in more foreign exchange. And all of that is totally necessary. So I will continue to encourage young students whose brains are wired up to do STEM to indeed pursue career options there. I think going to the United States has been a good option for me. And so, as you can see, it has worked out and paid huge dividends for me. And part of the fact is that it's easier to get financial aid from US universities than, say, from UK or Canadian universities. And yes, the price tag always looks higher for the US universities. But if you get a good financial aid package, you could end up paying less than you would pay at UWI. And for a lot of the students who are come through our SPICE program. The SPICE program is held at the Caribbean Science Foundation every year for Caribbean students who come from as far west as Belize and as far south as Guyana. And we groom them for these opportunities to apply to not just US universities, but also UK and Canadian universities. And that's a good place to start if you can get into the program. It's not meant for the average student, it's really for the superstars, but you should apply anyway. So the financial aid is one of the reasons, and you will find that a lot of US universities, they have undergraduate research opportunity programs, which sometimes do pay a stipend. And between the financial aid and the stipend and maybe the opportunity to get summer jobs, which is what I did when I was an undergraduate, I was able to make all ends meet. My dad did have to send money to the US to help me out at the beginning, and I was very grateful for that. But by the time I got to my fourth year, I didn't need his help anymore. And certainly from a good US university, you can go on and to a graduate school and pursue your discipline. But I would encourage a lot of the Caribbean students to consider entrepreneurship as one of the career paths. The other advantage, I think, of going to the US is the international perspective. You get to rub shoulders with students from all over the world and make friends, clearly with people from all over the world. And if you happen to get into one of the top schools, there's a good chance that you're going to be rubbing shoulders with people who are likely to be changing the technology world. They can give you jobs, or you might end up working for them, or they might work for you. You can form companies together. So the vibrancy of the university system in the US, which has a very, very different culture from that in the UK, is one I think that's conducive to helping us in the Caribbean to not only just to push technology and to get a good education, but also to maybe create companies if that's your interest. Or if you want to just become an academic and write papers and publish in the leading journals and teach and so on, that's okay too. But lots of career options, lots of jobs. Some of the wealthiest people in the world have made their money from STEM. So there are all a lot of good reasons why one of those attributes might be the thing to persuade you to go into STEM and make a goal.
Wonderful, thank you. Felicia and Dr. Lewis, STEM tends to be an overwhelmingly male-dominated part of study. Typically I studied math as an undergrad, and then, I'm sorry, Dr. Ward, I went to law school. But all my math classes were overwhelmingly men. I was one of only a handful of women. Can you each speak to your experience as a woman and an international student studying in the US in a male-dominated field?
Okay, yes. Well, in my case, for example, well, I did my computer science degree in the Caribbean. I went to the University of Technology in Jamaica, so I did my undergrad in the Caribbean. My PhD was done in the US. I did, in between, I did a MBA in Ottawa, in Canada. So I had experiences in studying in 3 different countries. I would say in the US, there is an emphasis on STEM subjects and also on minorities. There is a big push on having minority women in STEM fields. I cannot say that I in any way experienced any barriers based on gender. I felt that throughout my experiences, I had equal opportunities. There were, for example, in my undergraduate, I would say it was almost equal. Being computer science, it was almost equal. What I found was as I progressed towards the PhD level, again, there was that gender balance. Now, I was in a multidisciplinary program. So we had people from the various information systems, but I was in an I school, what is called a school of information. And therefore, you had people from various fields. You had people from library science, you had data scientists, you had people who were into computer networking and computer science. So some of the programs that were more technology oriented were male dominated, but I did not detect any difference or any barrier. To women who are interested in STEM fields, I would say do not be intimidated. And also, STEM fields offer flexibility. You do not necessarily have to remain, let's say you do computer science, you do not necessarily have to remain as a programmer or developer. The intersection with many different fields that you can branch out into. So you can combine computer science with business, you can combine it with medicine, you can combine it with education, which is what I did. So students should not feel that if you venture into the STEM field, that you can only be a scientist. You can combine it with many different fields.
Well, for me, I think the experience was, I would say, significantly different for a few reasons. As you would know, MIT is a very competitive school, a fairly difficult school to be accepted to. I think at the time, the freshman class was maybe less than 1,500 students. And international students typically take up about 10% of that. So, as an international student, you really do feel your minority status to a certain extent. What was great about MIT just generally is that MIT had multiple freshman orientation programs. I went to one called the Freshman Leadership Program. And when I got back on campus, I heard everyone's looking for you. Go to the ISO. The ISO itself, the International Students Office, has its own freshman orientation program. And obviously, as an international student, they were looking to find me because they had a package for me. They wanted to make sure I was okay. I guess I had an advantage over some of the other students because I had been to the Boston, Cambridge area before as a child. And then later on, I did because I wanted to go to MIT. So we went to see MIT while we were on another trip. As I said, very lucky. A lot of people don't get that opportunity. But what it does do is that to a certain extent, it kind of makes the bonds that form stronger. So it turns out that I have bonds with multiple groups of people. So I'm almost like a bridge. I was one of the early members of BWA, which stands for Black Women's Alliance, which is a group that focuses on support of Black women, run by those Black women. I also was a member of the International Students Association. And ironically, I was also a member of the Singaporean Students Association, which sounds really weird, but they accepted anyone wherever they were from. And I had a lot of Singaporean friends. That's the thing. I had a lot of Singaporean friends. I can say, just as Dr. Ward said, the opportunity for global friendships is immense. I met people from all over the world, and we pretty much keep in contact to this day. One of my best friends is of Taiwanese origin. She now lives in the States. By now, I assume she's a naturalized citizen. But you can make bonds that just do not break, forged in fire, if you will. With respect to gender, though, very different experience to Dr. Louis. I'll tell you hands down. Because first things first, as an undergrad, I didn't do electrical engineer and computer science. I did EE. And EE has the unfortunate reputation at MIT, or had, of being like the second most difficult major. The most difficult major was considered to be aeroastro. And straight electrical engineering was considered, number two. And so what I have found is that sometimes the reputation of a field scares some students away. But I was determined to do EE because I picked it by elimination. I looked at all the majors and I said, okay, so what can I do that in the future I can do renewable energy because there was no renewable energy major at the school, but I can also go home and work. And so by a process of elimination, ticking boxes, I decided EE was it. So I was determined to do EE. And what happened was that your core courses are EECS. Some of them are what we call J classes, which are multidisciplinary classes, sorry, which means that you kind of share a space with persons from MECI and so on. But as I went up, so, by the time that I was in junior year, you could usually count the number of girls in any of my classes, even the big ones, on the fingers of both hands. And by senior year, I remember I did microcomputer project lab, and there were four girls in this class of about 100. So it gets kind of rarefied up there. And what that tends to do is if you aren't totally confident in yourself and your own ability, it can put you off your stride a little bit because I also have to say I was the only Black female in the class. Everyone else was either Caucasian or Asian. That can make you feel, if you don't have strong bonds with other people, that can kind of make you feel like you don't belong. But because I never had this notion that I couldn't do this, like I didn't belong there in the first place, I think that it never entered my mind that the fact that there weren't that many girls was a big problem. I mean, you notice it. It's hard not to notice it. But I was taking the class with my Taiwanese friend, and we were just determined to pass because by the time that you get to senior year, you want that your class ring, and we get it at the end of sophomore year. You want it to mean something. You want to get that paper and graduate. So you try as much to focus, as possible to focus and to not let, what may seem like extraneous issues really cloud your judgment. I'm not going to say it's easy. Because you can be intensely uncomfortable. It's not that people won't say or do things that make you uncomfortable, but you can find support. And I found that the friendships that I made did help buffer. And I found that International Students Association, student services and so on, going to them helped if you have a problem. It did help, especially the International Student Association. They really understood what it's like to live in a place where you have no support network, and they try to provide one for you. So I found that was great. That was excellent.
Great, thank you. Dr. Ward, for those prospective students who are listening, who are in secondary school and are contemplating going into a STEM for undergraduate study, do you have any advice for them for how they can make themselves better candidates? Any sort of extracurricular activities they could do, or what sorts of, if there are extra classes they should take, or how can they help their applications stand
Excellent.
out?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. But first, to Felicia's comments, and also, of course, to the secondary school students. Most US universities bend over backwards to make sure that their undergraduate students are comfortable. Students from the Caribbean, you hear all the racial stuff that's going on in the United States and you get scared. Really, I shouldn't go there. And parents do, and grandparents worry about it also. But the campuses are very safe, and most of the campuses have a liberal bent, and they're reaching out to help solve some of the problems of the United States, where there's more peace and quiet and less racism. And so if you go to a US university, you'll find that the culture that you see on the campus is not what you see on TV. There are lots of offices, as Felicia talked about, International Students Office, the Dean of Students, and all these deans are all in place to make sure that you can focus on your work and you don't have a lot of garbage to worry about. And I would say, since you left, Felicia, we have the number of women, the percentage of women in the student body at MIT has increased significantly. It's not yet 50-50. And so in the final year, the senior year, there are a lot more percentage of women in the classes and so on. So we've moved, and we're trying to do the same thing at the graduate school level. That's where we have some problems right now. Those women that come in for PhDs and so on, their numbers are still low, and it's also low for minority students that, pursue a PhD. And it's even lower at the faculty. I mean, I'm rare breed on the campus still. But anyway, getting back to the question, those of you who are in high school, you're going to have to be daring. I would suggest that you take some calculated risk, because you're going to, if you leave Barbados to go to school anywhere, you don't know really what you're getting into. Felicia did it. She turned out well, In fact, she took one of my classes and she got an A+. So she did work very hard as an MIT student. But she did it, and you can do it too. So don't fear the unknown, but have faith. Think positively, like Felicia did. You heard her passion. That's the way you do it, and somehow doors will open for you. I mean, if you show up at a school and you're a top student, they admitted you, and you showed up and you didn't have any money, chances are some dean at that school, if you go and cry and say, I want to be here, I have to be here, you admitted me, they will find a way to make it happen. So I know it sounds crazy, but I often tell people, just go and see what happens. You got to take some chances in life, and doors will open. But yes, take advantage. If you're in high school, take advantage of internships, take advantage. I mentioned the SPICE program a few minutes ago. Take advantage of any robotics classes that you can do, any biology type classes that you can do, biology internships, because most schools are making their admissions decisions based on what they think you will become. They're trying to pick out the next Einstein or the next Nobel laureate or the next Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or whatever. And they have to do it when you're 17, 18 years old. So the more that you can show that you have this passion and this desire to change the world, evidenced by things that you have done in high school, the better off you are. Of course, you need good grades. You don't need perfect SAT scores. I can tell you that right now, because students have gotten 800s and haven't gotten into top schools. And I know them personally, right? The essays that you write make a big difference. Your letters of recommendation from your teachers are very important. And your high school grades are often considered a better indication of how you will do in university than your SAT scores, which you took in just one day. So don't panic on the SATs. Make sure that if you've been doing calculus, the first derivative should be positive. So if you start off weak in high school, make sure you get better and better all the time. And that impresses the universities. So I will also say, if you do go to university, you shouldn't stop at the bachelor's degree. You can, of course, go on like Dr. Lewis and get a PhD, and because it just opens more doors and gives you more opportunities, and you have a longer time to make more friends internationally and so on. And again, consider entrepreneurship. But I think there are lots of job opportunities if you go into the STEM fields. And in my particular case, you can see what it's done for me, if I'm a good example. And I've had the fortune of being able to collaborate with scientists in many, many countries all over the world. And even after I got my PhD, I'm making a plug here for going on beyond the bachelor's. And it allowed me to travel the world and see things that I normally would not have seen, and be in places that I normally would not have gone to. So opportunities come sometimes only once in a lifetime. And if you're young and in high school, you have to first see that that what comes in front of you is an opportunity. And please seize that opportunity, because it may never come again. And those who are most successful are the ones who have been able to see the opportunity, to seize it, and then act on it. And not after someone else has acted on it, says, oh gosh, I should have done that. I could have done that too. But it's too late. So get involved in internship programs, do volunteer work if you have to. Not everything has to be done for money. Those are the kinds of things that the universities look for. They're looking for people who are going to change the world in the future. And they have no way to tell except by what you have demonstrated or can demonstrate now.
I have to concur. I actually knew someone who themselves is Barbadian, American citizen now, but of Barbadian extraction, who worked in MIT admissions for a bit. And I remember having a conversation with her, because I kind of felt like, we don't get too many Bajans at MIT, and why was that? So I have come up with my recommendations, especially for Caribbean students, as to what they could and should be doing to get into especially top schools. Number one, work hard. Work hard. Try to get the absolute best grades that you can. Okay? The best grades that you can. Work hard. 2, engage your teachers. Make sure your teachers know who you are. Make sure that they can speak on your behalf. Okay? 3, convince your teachers to toot your horn like yours is the first horn that has ever been tooted and that it's the absolute best horn to toot any day, all day. Because at the end of the day, think about it in this context. There are 7 billion people on this planet. A cool multi-million might be, applying for school, and 100,000 might be applying to the school you're trying to get into. So you have to stand out from all of those other thousands of students. And how are you going to do that? Yes, you're going to write your essays, and believe me, I'm going to speak to that in a minute. But you see the teacher recommendations. If the teacher acts like you are the best invention since the wheel and you're the best thing since sliced bread, that is going to be a huge check mark, first and foremost. So make sure that you develop relationships with the persons who are supposed to be stewarding you through your educational experience. Okay? If you're going into math and STEM, they'll usually ask you for a math teacher and a science teacher. That's what most of these science schools will ask for, those recommendations, possibly the guidance counselor. So you buddy up to these people, I'm telling you. You want this. I can tell you what worked for me. Some people, they do athletics, which is great. I went into service. I was not an athletic person. I hit reality real early. I'm like, nope. I joined Key Club. Not only did I join Key Club, but I became a leader in Key Club. And you see that is a second check mark. If in anything you do, you are in a type of leadership position, that is going to distinguish you versus other persons who people will suspect, oh, that person just joined it because, it looks good on your resume. No, I was not the president or vice president, but I was for multiple years the social and programming chairperson. So it's my responsibility every time we had a meeting to make sure that the room was set up and we had a program. It was me, not the president, not the vice president. It was me and my team. I had a committee and we did that work. Okay. And what I also did is that there are organizations here called Community Independent Secretariats. Okay. That is something that had been pretty new at the time that I applied. But basically, as a part of our independent celebrations in each parish, there's a group of people who organize activities for the parish. Okay. And I was their first secretary, basically. And so in taking on a position of responsibility, that also demonstrates the kind of person that I am on the inside, because it's also a community focused group. So it's not just, you're going to get a job for money or whatever. You are volunteering your time to do something for your community. And that speaks volumes. So yes, I did great academically. Yes, but you see teacher recommendations. I had good relationships with all my teachers. Excuse me, showing that you have a track record of being civic minded, community minded, of leadership. That is going to get you in where nothing else does. But I can't say that my SATs hurt because I did get 1590. So I have to disagree slightly. I don't know if it was a game changer, but I'm pretty certain that the other parts weighed as much or more than my SATs because my grades were already good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, guys. And I just want to put in a plug that we have Ed USA advisors on each of the 7 islands throughout the Caribbean who are there to help prospective students who want to study in the US with their application process, who are there to help walk through the avenues of financial aid, which even as an American with multiple higher education degrees, it is a lot to navigate. even when I have familiarity with the system. So please take advantage of the advisors that we have to help you not only get into the school and program that you are most interested in, but to help find a way in which to fund it. Dr. Lewis, I want to turn back to you for a moment. And can you speak to your experience about, you studied in the US in STEM, and then you came back to St. Lucia to work professionally. What was that transition like? And how did your experience in the US help set you up for success when you came back professionally?
Okay, yes. Well, my transition was not too difficult because I worked with the public service before I went to study. So say for example, my earlier job, I was a teacher, and then I worked with the Department of Education. I worked within the IT field in the Department of Education. When I went to study, I took a leave of absence and came back to my job within the Ministry of Education. So I did not have too much difficulty transitioning. I think the problem for everybody who goes out to study is that sometimes you're exposed to so many different ideas, and you're exposed to a different environment. In the US, it's research based. There's a lot of funding for research. There is a big focus on publishing and continual research. Coming back, I think there is, of course, a noted difference. We do not have the type of money to put into research, so there is not as much emphasis here on it. So this would be one of the main differences. Going out to study also just opens your mind to how things are done in a different country, in a different context, not just the US, because it's a cultural exchange. And you meet people from all different countries, particularly as a Fulbright student. You meet people from Fulbrighters from all different countries in the world, and you find out how things are done in different countries. And I remember while I was there, my mind was constantly engaged and always writing down notes of, okay, oh, this can work, and this is how it's solved in this country, and this is how it's solved in this context. And when you get back to your own context, you realize that yes, you would like to implement certain things that you have observed. However, we have to be mindful of the funding that is available. So whereas it's very easy to implement a solution in the US, here the scale is much smaller. We may not have as much funding that's available. So these were the sort of the questions I had to grapple with. How do I implement some of the things that I have researched and studied, and being mindful of the constraints that we have. We have constraints on human resources, we have constraints on financial resources. So I think that was one of the main things. I would also say that in the US, when you study anything in the STEM field, although in my case, I ventured out a little more and I looked at it within the context of the public sector. So I saw, for example, when I did my research, my dissertation research, I looked at how technology was used in the Obama administration. So I went to Washington, D.C., spent some time in the offices, and you observe different technologies that are introduced, and our context is just different. So you have to be innovative and to ensure that whatever it is that we observe in different countries, we have to ensure that we can tailor it to our context, not just because the US employs a particular method that we have to necessarily tailor it the same way that it is done. Yes, was there a second part to the question?
No, that was it. But if you have more to say, please, by all means.
Yeah. I think we were talking, I just wanted to talk a little about the Fulbright part of the experience as well, and the emphasis that is placed on networking. And I think my fellow panelists mentioned that. But when you're studying, when you're a student, you always have to be mindful that you would one day want to either further your studies, or you would want to start a business or do a joint research project. So sometimes we meet people in the field and we just say hi, bye, and go. In the U.S. context, they teach you networking. You never ever let a meeting be a chance meeting. You take down that person's information and you find ways in which you can connect on a future project, a future research project, whether that person can connect you with an internship. That is the importance of, meeting, connecting, going to attending conferences in your field. That is also something else that was, oh yes, that's one difference. There are many conferences. As part of my study, I got a research allowance under Fulbright that would allow me to travel to conferences. So the work that you have been, whatever paper you have been writing, you get to go and present that paper to other individuals in your field. You get feedback, you come, you improve it, and then you can publish. Of course, here we do not have that level of funding. So since coming back, I think I was only able to attend one or two of these research conferences, but it is different because we do not have that level of funding.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Ward, I want to go back to you for a moment. In reading your bio, I am strong enough to admit that I don't understand anything that you write about. And so in trying to think of a question, I failed miserably, other than what does any of this mean? But I did want to ask you about, you run programs for high schoolers both in the US and then my understanding is a similar based program here in the Caribbean. And I wondered if you could speak to those programs a little bit, and specifically what your experience has been working with pre-undergraduate populations.
Yeah, so as I started by saying, I'm passionate about getting more disciples in STEM. So at MIT, we have a program called MITES. It stands for Minority Introduction to Engineering and Science. And what that program does is it brings high school students from the 50 United States to MIT every summer. They come during their junior year, the third year in high school. So they're 16, 17 years old. And we have them for 6 weeks at MIT. It's 5 in the Caribbean, 6 at MIT. And, they take calculus and physics and biochemistry and robotics and architecture and genomics. And it's very difficult to get into that program also. It's harder to get into MITES than into MIT because we have so many applicants. But these are some of the brightest high school students. And a large fraction of them do apply to MIT formally and come in later, a year later as first-year students. But they also go to Harvard and Stanford. And these are students who normally would not have applied to these top schools because they're disadvantaged in many ways. First, to go to college from their family and so on. And that program was a tremendous success. But MIT would not allow any international students to come into that program. So even though I'm the faculty director for it, I have to follow the rules. So then we started the Caribbean Science Foundation here in the Caribbean. One of the first things we decided is that we will have a program like the MITES program. And that is a program called SPICE, Student Program for Innovation in Science and Engineering. And you can see the banner on your screen right now. So that program is held in Barbados. We bring the students to Barbados. And also difficult to get into that program. But if you do get in, it makes a huge difference. We've got robotics programs going on in Barbados, also in the Caribbean Science Foundation, mostly for students between 10 and 18. We have 4 different levels of robotics. So that's something that you could do and put on your resume. It might help you to get an edge in applying to U.S. university or Canadian or any university anywhere. We also have computer coding workshops that run on Saturday mornings here in Barbados. They run from 9 to 12 on Saturday mornings twice a year. We run them from January to March, and then again from September to December. And there you have to be 15 years of age or older. So we advertise it. You can be 15 to 115, because we're trying also to help with workforce development in the region. And that's why we allow older people other than students to come into those workshops. So STEM education opportunities, we're not the only show, of course, on the planet. We're trying to help younger pre-college or pre-university students. I'm sure there are other programs in Barbados that I probably don't know about, and maybe Felicia knows some of them that you could enroll in. And the same thing is true, I think, for a lot of the other islands in the Caribbean. But yeah, that has been my passion. And as I said before, enrolling in things like this and showing leadership, as Felicia pointed out, and knowing your teachers and having them write strong letters of recommendation for you, that's the way to make the big leap. And I must say, some of the letters of recommendation that I've seen written by, Caribbean teachers, they don't have many superlatives in them. And that can be a problem, because you've got people in China applying to these top schools, and the teachers are saying they walk on water. And our Caribbean students are equally strong, but the letters of recommendation oftentimes don't show that. And it's part of, the British culture. Yeah, and so it does not inure well to the benefit of our Caribbean students sometimes. So I have to tell my colleagues to read between the lines and not just take the words of it. But my voice is very thin trying to make these points. And I've seen it happen where we had graduate students apply from Trinidad to the graduate school in my department. And when I looked at the letters, I was so shocked. It was like 3 sentences. And there were 2 students, and it was almost like copy. And I said, oh my God, these students, how am I going to convince my colleagues to accept these guys? It was sad. But that's cultural, and there's not much you as a student can do about that. But do talk to your teachers, and often I would say give the teachers some additional information that they may not have, so that when they're composing your letter, they can fold some of that in. That's about the best you can do. And after that, it's up to the teacher to put your best case forward.
I would also say, if it were possible, and persons like me, persons who have gone to university elsewhere, who have that experience, who know how to get into these schools, if it's possible to get those persons to speak to the teachers, to the guidance counselors, so they have a better understanding of the needs of their students in this context, that may be the best way to get the change that is needed. Because at the end of the day, students can say whatever. Teachers don't have to believe them. But if persons who have been there, done that, who actually know what's going on, can come in and say, okay, so I've seen application letters from this school or from this country, and they're poor. They don't really show what this student is capable of. And as a result, the student has lost the place that they really do deserve. Because, I can say wholeheartedly that, other persons that went to the high school I went to could possibly have been great students at MIT. But first, they have to have a sense that they can even get in. And they don't necessarily get that sense by the fact that not a lot of people have gotten in, and a big piece of that is not the effort that we make. It's none of that. It is being able to distinguish ourselves. And as I said, a big piece of the distinguishing yourself is, are your teachers ready to blow your horn? That is really what it is. Once the teachers can blow your horn, because there are other people competing on the same basis who are trying to find leadership positions so that they can also make themselves, you have to compete on every level, including the teacher recommendations. And I was told point blank that was where several of the Barbadian students who applied in years subsequent to myself really fell down, which is really sad, because that's not even within the realm of their control. But if more interventions could be made with faculty at high schools to have a discussion about, how can you help your students, then I think that maybe that would pay the biggest dividends.
Yeah, and I think just to jump on that point a little bit tangentially, through my various working through higher education, I've had a myriad of recommendations that are written for me over the years. To Dr. Ward's point, not only do I think is it really beneficial for students to get in the habit of sitting down and having a conversation with whomever is going to write their recommender letter, to sort of allow for a more robust personalization of the end product. It's also an invaluable skill to have in the professional world. I mean, I still, for every job I apply, need written recommendations. That part of my life hasn't gone away, even as I'm now, in my 10th year of working professionally for the federal government. And so the ability that you learn early and then hone in on and improve upon throughout life to build yourself a network and have people who are willing to write your potential in sentences is incredibly important for your success, both academically and professionally. We have about 4 minutes left. So do you each want to give a minute or so wrap up? Dr. Lewis, would you like to start?
Yes, absolutely. I would just encourage anybody who's thinking of applying to study in the US or applying for a Fulbright scholarship, that they should just go ahead and do it. I think students always think of when you hear STEM, they always think it's difficult or something hard to study. But I would like people to think of being flexible, meaning how you can intersect if you do an undergraduate in a science field, science or technology. You can intersect it with business, you can intersect it with any other that you not necessarily put you in a box. Just keep your mind open. And if you ever do get to study in the US, just try to explore and get enriched from every experience. Immerse yourself in the culture. Stick with people of your own kind, Caribbean people. Just immerse yourself in the culture and appreciate the American culture. It's quite different from what we see on television. It's a rich country, rich in culture and experiences. So this is just my admonition and encouragement to you.
Thank you. Felicia, do you want a minute or so to wrap up?
Sure, no problem. If you are thinking about studying in the US, what I would say to you is think about what it means for you, not for anyone else. And also understand that your path and other people's paths are not the same. Consider all of us here. Professor Ward, he went there as for undergraduate. He went on to become a professor. Professor Louis, she studied in 2 different countries before she went to the US. If you find that that first step is a little too long for your legs, do not give up. Just find a shorter step or find a step stool. If you find the path open to you is a polytechnic institution in your country, take that step. Take that step because the door remains open. The door always remains open. Never think you're too old or too this or too that. The door is never closed. The only thing that closes is your mind. The door remains open. Keep your dreams alive. Know that you can do it. And whenever you are able to take that step, go ahead and take it. There are many, many dividends. When I came back home, my family, they all said, are you picked up so much Asian culture? What's going on? Because I spent so much time with Asian international students that, my even my worldview kind of shifted. There are so many benefits besides just that you can get a better job. So never give up and just keep trying.
Thank you. And Dr. Ward?
Well, I'll briefly just add to what Felicia just said. I think, and I'm going to repeat myself, I think having faith and belief in yourself that you can do this and that you can be successful and that you can change the world, maybe change Barbados, change the Caribbean, is important. So do it for yourself, but also think about the bigger picture about humanity and community and an island and country as you go forward. So take the risk, go forward, have doors will open for you, as Felicia just said. And I think if you go forward with faith and the doors do open, seize those opportunities. Do all the right things right now to make sure that you can get to the point where those doors will open for you and you'll be successful. But I think being inquisitive, trying new things, volunteering, building all those bricks, building that base with those very important bricks would be important as you try to go up this pyramid. And it has worked for us. It's worked for the three of us here, and it's worked for lots of others, so it will work for you too.
Thank you very much, you guys. Thank you for your expertise and for answering questions so thoughtfully and comprehensively. To all the prospective students out there, I hope that you learned a lot from our panel on STEM this afternoon. And I just want to put out there for any prospective students either listening or who may see this on the internet later, please visit educationusa.state.gov, which is our State Department website that manages all of the Education USA programming. As I said earlier, we have advisors on all 7 countries throughout the Eastern Caribbean that can assist prospective students who want to study in the US with applications, how to take standardized tests, what the financial aid packages could be or are available and how to apply for them. And then also might answer questions about everyone's favorite topic, how to get a student visa. So if you have questions, that's the place to go. And again, I want to thank you so much for your time, panelists, and for being so wonderfully thoughtful during this panel.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.